I'm at a disadvantage here. I can't really say very much about Islam in America because I know very little about it. But I've listened to what the other three speakers have said. And I would say there's an almost exact parallel, really, in the UK. It's another Western country. We've had the very similar history, the very diverse groups. I would only add probably, I think, the real interest in Islam in England got going under the time of Queen Victoria, I would think. I mean, there were odd Muslims before that, but I think in the time of Queen Victoria, with her connections with India and the British Raj, I understand that Queen Victoria herself learnt Urdu and had Muslim servants at the palace of whom she was very fond. And I've also heard the rumour that she did actually declare Shahada. So whether we can count Queen Victoria as a Muslim or not, I'm not quite sure. Other people in the media these days have wondered about other members of the royal family, the more recent ones. Certainly, I would say there is a great interest in Islam in the royal family, a genuine interest in it. And what we're seeing at long last, I think, is the genuine teachings of Islam being made available to us in words that we can understand, because we've been very handicapped in the West. All the great texts of Islam that we would like to study have not been available to us, and the translations that have gradually been trickling through have been horrendous. Through nobody's great fault, but these are things which are improving all the time. So as genuine knowledge of Islam is coming through, I think as soon as people realise what we're actually about, it starts with a few converts and it gradually floods. And we're seeing a lot, and obviously I'm an example of this. I haven't been a Muslim as long as the gentleman here. I converted, I think, in 1986 through personal experiences, travels, meeting people. I certainly didn't accept Islam because I wanted to marry a Muslim, although as a woman of the West, that's underestimated, I think. The gents don't often think about this, but it did become very obvious to me that a lot of conversion of English women is done through less noble Muslims, shall we say, young Muslim gentlemen who are at discos and drinking the alcohol, dating the English girls when they shouldn't be. They're breaking all their own rules. And this is one of the strange ways, God moves in mysterious ways, that a lot of English ladies have come into Islam, because they've been impressed with these young men. They've enjoyed their company in ways they perhaps should not have done. They've then discovered the rules of Islam. They then discovered that these young gentlemen are not doing it quite right. They've become converted to Islam. The gentlemen have gone and left them in the lurch. They have remained Muslim, and a much truer Muslim probably than the gents that converted them. They've then sallied forth and gone down to the mosques to run into a brigade of a different type of Muslim who have not been quite so welcoming, their arms are not quite so open. They run into the Muslim males that will not shake their hands, that kind of thing. And some women will then turn around and leave because they're very disappointed with what they experience. But others, a more determined sort, will stick at it and think, well, yes, there are problems here. There are cultural problems. There are things that they don't know about the religion that they have to learn. And we have to learn tolerance and how to live together. And they stick with it. And I have a vast number of English lady Muslim friends. And I agree with the previous speaker that now I think I don't believe the number of, shall I call them white English Muslims has yet outnumbered the immigrants. I don't think so, but it's creeping up. And we look forward very much to the time, not that we want to outnumber them or anything like that, but we do regard Islam as a world faith. When I started off into Islam, I thought all Muslims were Arabs. And then I thought all Muslims were Pakistanis. And I gradually learnt, I got the lists of figures of what Muslims are where. And to my great surprise, I found out, there are very few Arab Muslims actually, that there are vast numbers of Muslims elsewhere. And it is a world faith. And we would like to feel that in England, we will soon see the emergence of English Islam. That doesn't mean that we'll turn the back on our immigrant teachers and brothers and families that have led us into it. But we do want to see our own culture as well. And of course, I think it's fairly true to say that most of the people who convert to Islam come from a Christian or Jewish background in England. They usually are religious people to start with. I don't know that we have vast numbers of people coming into Islam who are not religious to start with. For myself, it was very simple study of theology. I had to go where reason led me. I had to be true to what I felt was true, and made that decision. I was still attending church. There came a point where I suddenly thought, I honestly don't believe that. And that overtook me, and there came a point where I realised I had become a Muslim and I had to take that step. And as I explained in my first talk, it didn't mean that I loved Jesus any less, or, I just changed how I thought about him. And I went back to the Gospels and restudied them as a Muslim. And I'm very interested now in putting across to the West the Muslim teaching of Jesus that is in total correspondence with the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad and previous prophets. But that's another story. One odd little thing that I can think of, I don't know, I'm not very good at dates, I'm afraid. I'm not a scholar of this century at all. But I do think the first mosque that we had in England, or certainly one of the first mosques, but I believe it was the first one, it was the Begum of Bhopal, a Muslim female ruler. And you'll hear a lot of Muslims tell you can't have women rulers and woe-betide nations that are run by women and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, Bhopal has recently suffered an awful catastrophe. But they were run by a series of female rulers, one of whom used to visit regularly. She was very much into education for women. She was a great feminist. When she appeared in the UK, she was heavily veiled. You could just see her eyes peeping out. She was a little stout lady with just her eyes showing. But she founded the Woking Mosque. And I believe that Marmaduke Pickthall, who was the translator, one of the translators of the Quran into English, an excellent translation, he acted as the Imam of Woking Mosque for a long time. There was a stretch of time when Woking Mosque was taken over by sectarians whose Islam is debatable. I don't want to get into that, but it is now Sunni straight down the line. And I think when I went there as a visitor, the Muslims I saw then looked to me like Afghanistanis, Kashmiris, that kind of person. But anyway, now you can find mosques all over the UK. Some are custom built, more and more are custom built, but with loads of derelict churches, odd little buildings and things that get taken over, people's private houses, all sorts of funny places where Muslims will now meet. Converted English ladies have a bit of a problem because one of the things in Islam, we're supposed to marry Muslims. A Muslim man can marry a Jewish woman or a Christian woman without too much to do about it. But a Muslim woman is supposed not to marry a Christian or a Jew, but to marry a Muslim, which is a bit of a problem because a lot of the ladies that get converted have turned 40. And it's hard enough to find a good man anyway, turn 40. But then we've got to find a Muslim one, and they do tend to marry immigrants. And we get this calumny that they're becoming Muslims because they want to marry handsome young brown men, which may be the case for some, but I don't think that's really it. I was certainly Muslim before I met and married my second husband, and I don't think he would have married me if I had not been a Muslim already. And I certainly don't think our marriage would have lasted 5 minutes if I hadn't been a Muslim already, because the culture, the problems that we walked into head on were so enormous that had we not had this basis of shared faith and shared culture and shared optimism, it would have hit the rocks, I think, very quickly. And a lot of transcultural marriages do, in fact, go wrong quite quickly. You have to learn a lot of tolerance. And then they remarry, other things happen, and hopefully that they don't lose Islam. You just have to cling on to that. Have I said enough? Have I covered it? But certainly the great diversity of different types of Muslims. We get Muslim extremism in England like you do everywhere else. There's certain groups that cause a bit of a ruckus. They seem over-extreme. I always think that the best way of Islam is the middle way. This is what the Prophet taught. I have umpteen hadiths of the Prophet where he tended to disapprove of people who became too extreme. Fair enough, if they want to be extreme, that's fine. You could be as religious and extreme as you like, but you haven't the right to impose that on other people or make other people feel they're not as good as you. Only God knows who are the real goodies. So, we have trouble where people get a bit overzealous. Their hearts are in the right places, no doubt. Their piety is not in question. But sometimes their practice can be too much. And I've always maintained that, if you're a genuine Muslim, you're drawing people towards you and towards God. And you can sort of judge them. If they're the kind that drive people away, you would not want to marry that one, you would not want to sit down and have a meal with that one, then there's something slightly wrong with their Islam. A true Muslim is always attractive, beautiful. They will draw people towards God. And that, I think, is the mark of a true Christian as well, of course, a true Jew as well. But to draw people to God is our business, not to say you're doing this wrong or you're not good enough, you're not praying enough times, you made this mistake, that mistake. That's not Islam. It is Islam, but it's not the important thing is to realise that there is a God and there is a life after death, and Muhammad was a genuine prophet, and the rest of it will follow.